happened with our kids. Let me tell you a story because I know you love my stories. We had just moved to Germany with the military, just moved us over there. My husband was going on all these different field exercises with the infantry unit. And even though it's personnel, they needed an infantry guy they needed personnel with their infantry unit. And so he was gone 30, 60, and 90 days at a time. When he was gone, I realized I had the kids all to myself. And there was nobody else there to make them do what I was wanting them to do. And it suddenly dawned on me, if these kids were going to listen to me or they weren't. And that was about the time I really realized I had to start setting up some basic, simple rules, some simple systems within my house. And at that point, it was my house because my husband was gone a third of the time. Yes, it was his house when he came home, but when he wasn't, it was my house. I just didn't tell you that. It's my house when he's gone. It still is that way. But even these simple rules would carry over and let him be able to fit into our system when he came home. That's one of the ways I could do that. Maybe your husband's not in the military, but maybe he travels for work and he needs to be able to fit back in and figure out what in the heck are you doing with the kids? Is there a routine at home? How does he fit into it? Whether he's working in the mines and he's gone 3 weeks at a time and home too. I talked to one gal like that. Another guy whose husband was a wine distributor for a whole region, and he was gone during the weeks and home just on the weekends. And someone else whose husband did something else and he traveled all the time. Talked to gals whose wives are truckers and they're gone all the time. It seems like they're just home for a couple of days here and there. Another gal whose husband is in the medical field and he works shifts, and so with his shifts, he's not always home during the daytime, or at night when she'd like him to. So the kids are at school and he comes home and wants to sleep. And so, he's not there at night when she needed him. So many times it's up to us to set these routines. Are we going to be dictatorial and tell our husbands how to run the house? No, I'm not saying that. But you'd be surprised how many times when we set up basic systems to run our houses, our homes, our husbands will go, oh, okay, it's working, I'll fall in line. They just don't want to fight the mess. So what can we do? I'm going to tell you 4 different systems today that I found really help. Remember, we're training children to be adults. We're not just trying to treat them as kids. And yes, you can't treat them as an adult. You have to work within their intelligence level and their ability to do things. First thing I ask somebody is, do you have a set time for meals? And do you know what you're going to cook? It's amazing what a meal plan can do, a basic meal plan. I'll talk about that later when we talk about household routines in another video. But a basic meal plan, so you know what you're going to cook and you're not getting to dinner hour and the kids are screaming, they're tired, you're tired. Husband's coming home and says, what's to eat? And you don't have anything ready to fix. That's stress. We don't need that kind of stress. And that will help you with the kids. My kids, I know I was a little bit OCD maybe with it, but breakfast was at 7, morning snack was at 10, lunch was at 12, afternoon snack at 3, and dinner at 6. Now that meant too, my kids knew that they couldn't keep asking all day long, Mommy, when snack, when snack, when snack, when snack? Oh, I'm hungry. Well, it's 3 o'clock, you have to wait until 6. Or now 4, you got to wait until 6. You weren't hungry at 3. And you know what? This carried over. Our kids were, our younger son and his wife didn't have any kids of their own yet, and we were headed down a Texas road down to Schlitterbahn, and we're driving along in the car, and our son said, "Hey, what's for snack?" I looked at the clock. It was 10 in the morning. Here was a college graduate and married, and was wanting to know at 10 o'clock what was for snack. Did it set a routine? Yes. And that comes back to what the Bible tells us. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. You're training them in the habits of obeying authority. You're training them how to set up their own household, how to have routines, how to not constantly be snacking, but to put it at a certain time in their day so that they're not just constantly eating something. Part of the reason why we end up with so much overweight, we just constantly eating. But when we know when it's going to be, we can plan out some healthy snacks. Meals. As I said, that's always our meal time. But my husband can't get home at 6, some gals will say. I said, okay. So I ended up telling my husband, honey, the kids and I've decided we really need a routine so that the kids know what to do so we can set up for the rest of life. And when we start off with mealtime, it's the easiest place to start. And I said, I'm going to have dinner at 6. He said, okay. I said, and if you're not home, I will keep it warm on the stove or wherever until after dinner, and then I'll make you a plate and I'll put it in the refrigerator, and you can heat it up when you get home and put it in the microwave. If it's there the next morning, I'll put it in the freezer. But it was surprising. Once he knew the hour and time that dinner was, it was at 6 o'clock every night. How many nights he could be there at 6 o'clock when he was in town, not when he was out in the field doing military exercise. And he could tell his bosses, hey, I'm going to run home and grab dinner with my wife and kids, and I'll be back to finish up this project after dinner. Our routines let our husbands also have structure. Think of a school system. You know, they have the morning bell when school starts. They have lunchtime set for them at the same time every day. If they're little ones, they have a snack at the same time every afternoon. And they get out of school at a certain time. We run our organizations by a system of routines and time schedules. And yes, your home is your personal organization. And you are the chief managing officer of that home. Now, yes, you have a boss, God, and then your husband that you fall under if you're married. But if you're a stay-at-home mom, you can set it up that way. If you're not a stay-at-home mom, still plan when you're going to have dinner and when's breakfast time. Maybe it's a rolling breakfast. Maybe breakfast is from 7 to 8. Or maybe breakfast is from 6:30 to 7, and the kids can come in anytime they want. But you're leaving the house at 7:30 to drop them off to school and head to work. You know, you have a system set up. You know, you can't just show up at work whenever you want to. The same thing. This starts to teach the kids those basic principles of following authority and coming under a schedule. So that's number one. Set up a meal time. When are you going to be your meal? The second thing I asked this mom who just didn't like herself and said she was yelling at the kids all the time and they never listened, never did what she wanted. I said, do you have a bedtime? She said, yes, we do. I said, asked her when it was, and she told me. I said, and did they go to bed then? She goes, no, they don't. They fight me. I said, do they stay in bed once they get in bed? Nope, they come back out of bed. So we had to talk about the whole way of getting kids to stay in bed and how do you do that? That takes a discipline, a rule system, which is the next one, number 3. We need to have rules set in place with consequences. Some of those rules aren't fun. We had to talk about that, how we as the parents are responsible to train our children. There's a lot of things in Proverbs too that talk about how to train your children. And it's important to train them in the way to go. Yes, they may not want to go to sleep at that time. So we talked about one child that was ADHD and maybe they needed headphones to go to sleep. We talked about what to do with the toys. That was another issue, where to put toys and where were the toys going to be. And I'm just going to say this right now, that part of the problem with toys is when you have a toy room, nobody feels responsible for taking care of it. And if you tell all the kids to go in the toy room and go pick up the toys, nobody knows where they go. Nobody knows who's responsible for what. So I greatly discourage a toy room. I suggest that you have the toys in the room where the kids are, that they learn to be responsible for their own toys. Again, it's a rule. If they can't pick them up, they don't get them for a while. I mean, you know, if you can't pick up your stuff, you leave it outside. You know, you leave your computer out in the open in the car and you don't lock your car. Is it going to stay there? Probably not in a big city. You leave your phone just sitting out. You're out shopping at Walmart and you put your phone down because you're not paying attention to your stuff. And you walk off. Is it going to be there when you come back? It might, but more likely it won't. Or you're going out of the store and you got your purse and you're putting money in and you drop a 20 and you go and you start walking out and you get back to the car. I thought I had an extra 20 in here. It's not in here. You go back in the store. Is it there? Probably not. We need to learn to take care of our own things with consequences. And I can help you set that up if you want, because that's so important, that there are consequences to our rules. I like to have simple rules. Usually for moms, it's no whining, arguing, sassing, backtalking, or anything, or questioning, anything that sounds like that type of behavior. That comes into the Bible. Let your words be edifying and uplifting. And then we have chores that have to be done, and there needs to be a consequence for not doing the chores. The Bible says if a man doesn't eat, he doesn't work. It might not be food. It might be something else. Maybe if they don't do their work, they don't get dessert. They have to go to bed early. They have to sit. I love timeouts because it can be gradual for the age the children are. I started timeouts with our oldest when he was 18 months because I found out he very easily knew the difference between do that and don't do that. Particularly when I say, don't touch that cookie on the table. because I have, and he'd reach over there and he'd look at me and he'd have his hand on the cookie and he'd look back to see if I was looking, and I was, and he'd grab the cookie. He knew he wasn't supposed to do it. He knew what was right and wrong, but he did it anyway. So there was an immediate timeout. And I had to put that little chair right in the kitchen so I could watch him while I was cooking dinner. So anyway, and make sure he stayed on it. I had to teach him that. But that's the whole process of doing that. You can do this clear up with the kids until they leave home. I did it clear up with our kids until they were 18 and leaving home. I remember one time they were in the backyard having a fist fight over something. And their dad was gone on another deployment. Actually gone to war that time in one of the countries where we've been at war. And the kids were fist fighting in the backyard. And these guys are both taller and bigger than I am by this point. You know, they're in high school. And I got down in their faces. They were now down on the ground wrestling. I got in their faces and I said, get up and go to your rooms right now. You're taking a time out. And then I said, and I'm going to my room and taking a time out until I cool down. I'll tell you when you can come out of your rooms. Now, normally it's 2 minutes old more than they are old. And at 15 and 17, that would have been, you know, close to 20 minutes apiece. So but I was upset enough. I needed to calm down. So they just stayed there until I calmed down. And why did they do that? Because I learned to do that earlier. I taught them earlier. You know, if you don't want your kids to follow in you, just don't tell them what to do and don't make them do it. Then you'll wonder why at 10 or 12, you say you can't go out the door and they're running out the door. You tell them, no, you can't go out with that boy. Or I don't want you hanging around those kids that are smoking over there. And lo and behold, they're doing it. And you don't have any consequences. Starting rules and consequences early. I ended up putting right on the refrigerator. So that's number 3. We've talked about mealtime. We've talked about a bedtime. I've talked about rules and consequences. Usually it's sassing, following directions or orders or comment parents what the parents are telling them to do. That's usually number 2. And number 3 is just picking up a stuff. That's kind of a hard thing. And if they have a bin for each item and they can't pick it up, maybe they've got too much stuff. Maybe it's in a room and they don't know what stuff is their stuff and they're blaming the brother or sister. So there's a lot of organization, that decluttering things that go into that stuff things. I've got another book on decluttering, but this is the one on priorities. You'll find a bunch of these things in here on the priorities book. And I work a lot with moms on that. So number 4 is time for you and time for your husband, to set aside time. So it was meals, bedtime, rules with consequences, and setting aside time for you and your husband. First off, let's set aside time for your husband. This is that date time I talk about. And yes, if the kids run the whole shebang, and you've got something every night of the week, and you've got things all day on Sunday and all day on Saturday, when are you going to have time with your husband? We had to literally step back with our kids, because when I did this, it was just way too busy. Kids were gone all the time, everywhere. And there wasn't that time for my husband. I had to realize that first off, kids don't have to experience everything at once. They can do it sequentially and try things and see what they like. If you have multiple kids in the house, you're going to have to limit how much car driving you can do, because you can't be 2 and 3 places at once. One of our sons who has their kids in a sport in the local area, mom's coaching one team and dad was coaching the other team, but he has to travel too much, and so he can't be there all the time. Mom can't always get the younger one to his sports practice because she's coaching the other team. And so you have to figure these things out. How much time do you really have? And can your husband really help you? Can you find carpools? But remember, if the kids are so busy that they don't have time to do their chores, you might have them doing too much. I know that's not fun to hear in this society. We want the kids to try everything, but they don't have to try it all right now. It's more important they learn how to follow directions. They learn how to follow rules. They learn how to keep their home so that they can manage a room or a college dorm or a home later. And they can, apartment, whatever they're going to live in, a group of bachelors living together, whatever, that they can do those things. And so keeping it down to a low roar. We limited our kids to 2 activities. And first off, we insisted for our family that they be able to attend the youth group at church. That was one. And fortunately, both groups always met on the same night, so we could take both of them there. The second thing we wanted for our kids was a sport. something they could do on a regular basis. They can learn as a child, continue as a teenager, and have a sport that would last a lifetime.